What to do, lads? My name is John. This is Across the Board, and I am going to talk about the new NFL CBA agreement. So if you don't know, the NFL owners agreed to a new CBA deal with the NFLPA that is good until 2030. This deal was extremely close to not happening, as there was only about a 60 vote, less than 60 vote discrepancy between a yes and no. I believe it was around 1,019 votes yes and 959 no's. Literally 60 votes from this being tied. But ultimately, majority wins, and the NFL has a new CBA deal. Now, there was tons of players, former and current, that had a lot of problems with this deal, and there was people that were on the opposite side hoping that this deal got done. I'm going to explain to the best of my abilities what this deal entails and why maybe some people had some issues with it. So the deal has 17 games now in the 2021 NFL season. They are adding an extra regular season game while taking away a preseason game. The deal also sets that there will be 7 teams in each conference that will go to the playoffs. One more now than what was previously given. So now there will be 14 of the 32 NFL teams that will make the playoffs every single year. The player revenue went up from 47% to 48%, which equals out to around $5 billion for the next 10 years. And that's $5 billion over 10 years, not $5 billion every single year. There will also be no suspension for THC use. So for players that have been busted, have been tested for smoking marijuana, they're not going to be suspended. And I believe they stopped testing after week 2. And the amount of training camp practices, I believe, go from 28 to 16. So all of those sound like pretty decent deals. But if you weren't really following the CBA, then you might not know why so many players had issues with it. Now, the likes of Aaron Rodgers have said no, J.J. Watt, Richard Sherman, Marquise Pouncey. All of these guys have had some pretty big issues with the new CBA, and maybe this is why. The NFL is going to be able to make a ton of more revenue off of the playoff game and the regular season game with all of the new TV contracts that they make. So a 1 to 1.5% increase in revenue really isn't all that much in terms of how much the NFL is making themselves. There's also the issue of franchise tagging, as the franchise tag is still a thing, which was, at least a few years ago, a big talking point on if that was going to go away in the new CBA. Even Marquise Pouncey went on Instagram to express why he was against the deal, and even said that if the players that are the younger players are worried about not making as much money, that he would give them the money if they were so concerned about it right now so that they could get a better deal. Ultimately, that didn't happen. The minimum players now get 20% increase, which is quite a bit. And around 60% of the NFL is under the minimum deals, which is actually kind of insane. $100,000 put into players' pensions that have been retired. Some players are even getting $50,000 right up front. But to be fair, those players that are retired aren't playing that 17th game. Me personally, I think it's kind of a win for the NFL owners. I mean, the franchise tag is still a thing, and that really just holds on to a player for 7-8 years, and it really drastically changes their entire future. As, I mean, most players' ages are 3 years in the NFL on average, and controlling a player, that's great for 8 years. They don't have much in the open market, and especially someone like a running back. I mean, as much as I love my Pittsburgh Steelers, we did Le'Veon Bell dirty. And of course, Steeler fans and the Steeler organization probably doesn't think of it that way, because they think of it as business. And that was the issue with the NFL CBA. That's not going to change until 2030 at least. I do love that players aren't going to be suspended for marijuana anymore, but it's kind of ridiculous that, look, I've been big on the CBA being a big change, and I thought it was going to be a big change, with the likes of Todd Gurley talking about it a few years ago, and I don't think that they got what was anticipated, at least a few years ago. I had discussions about this, and there were so many people that said they're going to use the marijuana use as a way to get less in the CBA. They're going to take away weed so that they can keep more of the money. And I was like, no, I don't think that that's going to be an insane thing. I think they're still going to get a lot, with that just being one of the first ones off. And when we're talking about headlines that say this is the big thing, I don't think that that is necessarily the biggest incentive that the players just got. But when that's one of the talking points, It's a little disheartening. That should have been flushed out quick, and it seemed like the owners smartly used it to their advantage. I was also really shocked that they didn't get this 50-50, and it's just 48%. It seems like that 2% isn't all that much, but when they really got a lot of what they wanted just by raising their revenue for players up from 1%, it shows you what that 50% could be. I don't even know if it will be 50% in 2030. Ultimately, I don't think that this was too much of a win on NFL players' freedom. There was some amount of improvement, but not a ton. And I think that's why the NFL owners are looking like geniuses right now. I think that there was a lot of players worried that there could be a lockout, and there wasn't going to be a lockout this season. So it felt like, okay, this could still be revisited later, if not continuously being talked about. I think Marlon Humphreys even tweeted that there was around 500 people that did not vote on this, which definitely sucks because as we see with 60 votes changes what the outcome is going to be. I mean, literally almost 10% of that could have been the change. So I think that we really have to ask ourselves, are what the players getting worth it to play another game? As the NFL is going to be racking in a ton of money, and they're not paying the players a ton for these practices and everything that they're reducing. So the NFL, again, and the owners, again, make a ton of money off this. And I don't know how much the players really get back in that scenario. I'm really hoping that some rule changes are implemented because as much as they talk about player safety, this is a bad look on the player safety front when they're going for a 17th game. I think that adding another game ends up hurting the importance of each game, for one. I think adding another team to the playoff, again, ends up hurting. I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I love the Steelers. We had no right of being in the playoffs this year, and the Steelers would have made the playoffs if there was a seventh team that was in. We had no right of being in the playoffs. Nobody should be watching Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph as the quarterbacks in the NFL playoffs. The largest issue that I have with the NFL CBA agreement is that the players that had voted yes were not allowed to change their vote after all this stuff has happened. It's not like there's been some insane pandemic or anything that's happened. It's not like some people may have raised more concern with their health. No, nothing like that has recently happened. And again, I think this goes into the NFLPA looking bad as it didn't care as much for the players' true opinions on this as they wouldn't let them change their vote. The players should have been able to change their vote. That's absolutely ridiculous. So the likes of J.J. Watt, Aaron Rodgers, Marquise Pouncey, they don't feel like it's enough to play in that game and to risk their health. Maybe it is for 60% of the NFL to make some extra money, or for the guys that are retired are happy about it because they get some more money in their pocket. But I do feel as though the NFL players could have gotten a lot more, and maybe that's just me being an optimist, but I feel as though they could have gotten more. I was always anticipating that they were getting more, and seeing this, I don't see too much of a change that the NFL owners end up making, and I see that the NFL players certainly folded very, very quickly. I don't even think it would have been a bad thing to do a lockout, but I think the players were scared of it, and I think the NFL owners were bluffing a bit. I mean, what are you going to do? There's an NFL lockout. You can't just put on subpar players and expect the same ratings to be there. It wouldn't happen. If there was Duck Hodges actually starting in the NFL, the ratings are going down. I don't think the NFLPA got nothing out of this, but ultimately, I think that they could have gotten a lot more. They decided not to risk it. Maybe that was the best way to go. But I know that there will certainly be some people at the top that are very upset, and even probably some people in the middle that are upset as well. Maybe the guys that are making the minimum deals are a little bit happier here, but I always expected more out of this. We didn't get that. It is what it is there. I guess that's my feelings on the NFL CBA. Thank you for watching. Deuce.